Please allow me to introduce myself. You can call me Sonia, and I'm here to say stuff about Sympathy for the Devil. I think I have to thank the video creator 12 Tone for inspiring me to give this song a close analysis, because I'm not sure I would have thought to do so if not for him. This song has always been one of my favorites from the Stones. My parents are moderate Stones enjoyers, and I grew up hearing a lot of their songs quite regularly. In my opinion, the Rolling Stones catalog has an unusually wide range of how well songs have aged. We have a notable bunch that have aged poorly, along with a number that have aged like fine wine. Sympathy for the Devil is one of the great topical Vietnam era songs, without a doubt. Just to be clear, this video is not making any commentary about Mick Jagger as a person. I am focusing only on this great piece of art that he and his bandmates released to the world in 1968, after which the world was never the same. This train of thought started from what may sound like a surprising place, but this is how a lot of my trains of thought go. Totally off the rails. Okay, you know the moment toward the end of the song when Mick Jagger sings, "Just as every cop is a criminal, and all sinners saints." Recently, I heard the song on the speakers at my job, and I thought, I just know Mick Jagger did a dramatic arm flourish when he recorded that line. There's no way he didn't. Shout out to Sideways. It's kind of like in the opening number of Beauty and the Beast when Paige O'Hara sings, "But she won't discover that it's him till chapter 3." And you know she smiled when she sang that. Mick definitely did a swoosh with his arm. Even more recently, I heard Sympathy for the Devil again, and I had another thought. You know, this is a villain song of sorts, because he's singing from the perspective of the devil, who is an evil character. And then I thought about it some more, and I thought, no, this isn't just a sort of villain song. This is the ultimate villain song, because the character of the devil is the very personification of evil. And who does flamboyant gestures while talking or singing about how evil they are? Villains. So, in my humble, non-religious opinion, there is no actual guy called the devil who lives in a dark, fiery place called hell. I think he's a figment of our collective imagination who takes on many forms and can represent a number of things. Visually, depictions of the devil range from the pan-derived goat man of the Middle Ages, to the glowering twink with bat wings of romantic art, to the goofy red guy of modern pop culture. In Sympathy for the devil doesn't seem to fit any of these usual depictions. He's a man of wealth and taste, the well-dressed type of bad guy. And he's also a much more abstract figure than what we're accustomed to. Mick Jagger makes clear right off the bat that he's speaking metaphorically about evil through the familiar Christian character of the devil, rather than making any direct statements about religion or the supernatural. In this version of things, the devil is intentionally amorphous, and he doesn't represent evil in the form of temptation like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. He's more like a constant force that exists to some extent in all of us, when after all, it was you and me. And also an agent of pure chaos, sort of like Eris from Sinbad. Satan, evil personified, has gone by many names, and evil is a game whose nature is eternally puzzling. I think we humans have a natural impulse to personify abstract concepts. Humans default to seeing things in human terms, and personification makes difficult ideas seem more concrete and understandable. The amorphousness of Mick Jagger's version of the devil resists tangibility. He has no form other than being voiced by Mick Jagger, which challenges our common tendency to assign a name and face to evil. Even if we don't believe in the literal existence of a guy called the devil who represents all evil, we often think of specific individuals, such as political leaders, as special, psychopathic incarnations of evil. And we often craft fictional and real-world narratives with simple morals about good people opposing evil people. I'm reminded of an incredible quote by the Iranian graphic novelist Marjan Satrapi. Quote, "If I didn't know any people from other countries, I'd think everyone was evil based on news stories. But I know a lot of people, and I know there is no such thing as stark good and evil. Isn't it possible there is the same amount of evil everywhere?" Unquote. I think Sympathy for the Devil is making a similar point that you can try to attach evil to a persona, but you will never be able to pin it down. With no concrete name or appearance assigned, Mick Jagger's version of the devil is about as abstract as you can get in the representation of musical villainy, while still keeping the villain a character, however amorphous. Let's talk a little bit about villain songs more broadly. Villainous characters have probably had songs as long as singing characters have existed, but I would say that in the current American popular consciousness, the idea of a villain song really became established with the films of the Disney Renaissance, which started with The Little Mermaid in 1989. For the sake of simplicity, focus, and sticking to my wheelhouse, I'm going to be discussing songs from these films when talking about villain songs, since I'm not super well versed in the canon of musical theater. I'm going to assume everybody tuning in is familiar with the movies I'm going to be talking about, and I won't have to explain too much. Sympathy for the Devil has many of the qualities that we've come to expect from a villain song, and it predates most of the villain songs we know and love by at least 2 decades. Like the majority of villain songs, this is an I am song, wherein the character sings about how evil he is. It's so much of an I am song that it starts with the line, "Please allow me to introduce myself." Sort of like Ursula the Sea Witch, the narrator, the devil, both is and is not direct about who he is and what his intentions are. He's manipulative, but he also kind of lays it all out for the listener. Sympathy for the Devil is structured like a riddle whose answer is obvious, like a musical rhetorical question. Apparently the woo-woos in the background were originally hoo-hoo, like a who are you, hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo kind of thing. But in the recording process, the sessionists found that woo-woo sounded better. The idea to have those backing vocals in the first place was suggested by backup singer, sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Anita Pallenberg, one of those many women in history who quietly had a great idea. I still like the interpretation I've always had, that the woo-woo calls to mind an unstoppable train, kinda like locomotive breath or crazy train. Another major aspect of Sympathy for the Devil that makes it more of a villain song than a typical pop song is the fact that it needs to be performed, not merely sung, and that's exactly what Mick Jagger does. Not just anybody could have pulled this off. Like, can you imagine Paul McCartney trying to sing this? It would probably end up sounding like Why Don't We Do It in the Road? Our favorite Disney villains all have incredibly expressive, evil-sounding voices, even when they're not singing. Most of all, Pat Carroll as Ursula and Jeremy Irons as Scar, in my humble opinion. I can tell Mick Jagger is having similar fun with this performance in the role of the devil, coming across as both despicable and slightly camp. Mick Jagger in his youth had a stage presence with many of what we consider the marks of an iconic villainous character: flamboyance, androgyny, glitter, bright colors, kinetic dance moves. I would say that in terms of overall thematic vibes, Sympathy for the Devil is most similar to Friends on the Other Side from The Princess and the Frog, although I believe it wasn't until Moana in 2016 that we got an evil Disney character with visual aesthetics derived from the glittery rock and rollers of yesteryear. I am, of course, referring to Tamatoa the crab, who is not the central antagonist of the film, more of an obstacle on Moana's journey, akin to the Cyclops in Homer's Odyssey, but he is definitely worth mentioning here. I think I've made a solid case about why Sympathy for the Devil qualifies as the ultimate villain song conceptually, but before I wrap up, I want to take some time to gush about the major aspect of the instrumentals that makes this song so musically effective at delivering its message. Everything comes down to the percussion. According to my best friend in the whole world, Wikipedia, what we're hearing is a beat derived from samba music, which is an Afro-Brazilian musical style that Mick Jagger became interested in when he visited Brazil. The percussion on this song was provided by Mick Jagger himself, as well as his bandmates Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts, and the Ghanaian percussionist Rocky Jajornu. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. I honestly never gave conscious thought to the drums in Sympathy for the Devil, probably because I'm not a percussion person in general, but I did pick up on an African or African diaspora vibe. I think the samba beat works really well to establish the frenetic tone of the song. In 1995, Mick Jagger said that the beat on Sympathy for the Devil, quote, has a tremendous hypnotic power, doesn't speed up or slow down, keeps this constant groove, unquote, which is a good way to put it. He went on to say that there is, quote, an undercurrent of being primitive, because it is a primitive African, South American, Afro, whatever you want to call that rhythm, which is not such a good way to put it. What I would say is that Christianity has tended to have an aversion to percussion and has at various times characterized too much percussion as contrary to the godly ideal for music. Christian music generally stays away from intense rhythms, and let's not forget that rock and roll itself was called the devil's music when it was new, due to its energetic, danceable beats. To the Western ear, uninhibited percussion gives the impression of being contrary to order in some way, at least a little bit disruptive to the status quo. Be Prepared from The Lion King uses chaotic sounding drums to similar effect. Of course, because people are stupid, there were some concerns at the time that Sympathy for the Devil meant that the Rolling Stones were literally a bunch of devil sympathizers, which goes to show that the public lacking media analysis skills isn't really a new problem. The way the song opens with the samba percussion and Mick Jagger going, "Ow! Whew!" before we hear any piano or guitar probably did sound pretty darn confrontational in 1968, and I think that's cool. The percussion literally comes first, followed shortly by Mick Jagger's performance of devilishness, because those are the two most important components of this composition. While, as Mick Jagger said, there's no speeding up or slowing down over the course of Sympathy for the Devil, there is a sense of build-up, which I sort of interpret as symbolic of the progression of history. Sympathy for the Devil is a deeply cynical song about how evil is eternal as long as there are struggles for power. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for when I have more stuff to say.